In a galaxy far beyond the reach of human imagination, there existed a race so powerful and cruel that their name alone struck fear into the hearts of countless civilizations. They called themselves the Valons, a species that had risen from the ashes of their own primitive beginnings to dominate the stars. Their empire stretched across thousands of star systems, swallowing planets whole, enslaving populations, and stripping resources without mercy. For centuries, no one dared oppose them. Why would they? The Valons were not just conquerors, they were predators, feeding on the weak and thriving on destruction. The Valons saw themselves as gods among mortals, untouchable rulers of the cosmos. Their ships, massive, sleek machines bristling with weapons, patrolled the skies of conquered worlds like vultures circling prey. Their soldiers, clad in armor that shimmered with an almost otherworldly glow, enforced their will with brutal efficiency, and their leaders, seated atop towering spires of glass and steel, plotted expansions into uncharted territories, always hungry for more. To defy them was to invite annihilation. But deep in the outer reaches of the galaxy, something unusual began to stir. A tiny blue planet, barely noticeable against the vastness of space, caught whispers of attention. It wasn't supposed to matter. Earth, as its inhabitants called it, was considered insignificant by galactic standards. Its people were still learning how to harness energy, explore their solar system, and understand the mysteries of the universe. Compared to the Valons' advanced technology and centuries of interstellar dominance, humanity seemed laughably primitive. Yet, despite their limitations, humans possess qualities that set them apart from most other species. Curiosity burned brightly within them, driving them to ask questions others wouldn't dare consider. Resilience flowed through their veins, allowing them to rise again after every fall. And perhaps most importantly, they had a stubborn streak, a refusal to bow down, even when faced with overwhelming odds. These traits might have gone unnoticed if not for one fateful discovery. It started with a signal. Scientists on Earth, scanning the heavens for signs of extraterrestrial life, picked up faint transmissions drifting through space. At first, they thought it was random noise, echoes of cosmic phenomena bouncing around the void. But as they analyzed the data further, patterns emerged, patterns too deliberate to be natural. Someone out there was talking, or rather, commanding. Decoding the messages took months of painstaking effort, but eventually fragments of information came together. The signals spoke of conquest, of fleets moving between stars, of worlds falling under the shadow of a great empire. The scientists realized they weren't alone in the universe. And worse, they weren't safe. The Valons weren't just explorers or traders. They were hunters, seeking new lands to claim and new lives to crush. News of the discovery spread cautiously at first, confined to research labs and government offices. But secrets rarely stay hidden forever. Soon, stories leaked into public consciousness, sparking debates and fears. Some dismissed the idea as science fiction, refusing to believe that beings from another world could pose any real threat. Others panicked, in imagining invasions and apocalyptic scenarios. Amidst the chaos, one voice stood out, a scientist who had spent decades studying the stars. This elder figure, respected for their wisdom and experience, warned of the dangers ahead. "We cannot ignore this," they said during a televised address. "If these creatures are as powerful as we suspect, then our survival depends on preparation. We must unite, innovate, and defend ourselves." Their words carried weight, yet many dismissed them as alarmist. After all, what could puny humans do against forces capable of traveling between stars? While politicians argued and skeptics scoffed, a small group of visionaries quietly began working behind the scenes. They scoured archives, studied intercepted signals, and pieced together clues about the Valons' technology. Then came the breakthrough. a fragment of alien machinery found floating in deep space, likely debris from a distant battle. Reverse engineering it revealed secrets beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Quantum propulsion, energy shields, and weapons powered by principles unknown to Earth's brightest minds all became possible thanks to this single artifact. With renewed determination, humanity embarked on a crash course of innovation. Factories churned out prototypes, laboratories buzzed with activity, and engineers worked around the clock to adapt alien tech for human use. Progress was slow and fraught with failures, but each setback brought lessons that pushed them closer to success. Slowly but surely, Earth began transforming itself from a backwater planet into a potential contender on the galactic stage. Meanwhile, the Valons remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing at the edge of their empire. To them, Earth was nothing more than a speck, a minor curiosity unworthy of serious attention. When reports trickled in about unusual activity emanating from the blue planet, they sent a scout fleet to investigate. Surely it would be a routine mission, a chance to assert dominance over yet another primitive civilization? Little did they know, their arrogance would lead them straight into a trap. Humanity, though young and inexperienced, had one advantage the Valons couldn't comprehend: unpredictability. While the invaders approached with confidence, expecting easy submission, the people of Earth prepared to show them exactly why underestimating humans was a fatal mistake. And so, the stage was set. Two vastly different forces, one ancient and ruthless, the other young and defiant, were about to collide. The outcome would change the course of history, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. The Valon scout fleet arrived in Earth's orbit with the kind of arrogance only a species accustomed to dominance could muster. Their ships, massive angular vessels bristling with weapons, loomed over the planet like dark clouds blocking out the sun. To them, this was just another routine mission, a chance to remind yet another primitive civilization of its place in the universe. They didn't bother hiding their presence. Instead, they broadcasted a message loud enough for everyone on Earth to hear. "Attention, inhabitants of this insignificant world," the transmission began, delivered in a mechanical tone that sent shivers down spines across the globe. "You are now under the jurisdiction of the Valon Empire. Submit immediately or face annihilation." For a moment, silence gripped Earth. Governments scrambled to respond, military leaders debated strategies, and ordinary people watched helplessly as news outlets replayed the ominous message. Fear spread like wildfire. The Valons weren't bluffing. They had proven time and again that they would destroy anyone who dared defy them. But something unexpected happened next. Instead of cowering, humanity chose to fight back. A young strategist emerged as a key figure during these tense hours. This individual wasn't a soldier or a politician, but someone who understood patterns, tactics, and human nature better than most. From a makeshift command center buried deep underground, they coordinated efforts between nations, ensuring unity where division might have spelled disaster. It was their voice that urged calm when panic threatened to take hold, their vision that inspired hope when despair loomed large. "We've prepared for this," the strategist said firmly, addressing a room filled with anxious faces. "We may not have their numbers or experience, but we have something they don't: an unshakable will to survive. If we stand together, we can win." With those words echoing in their ears, humanity made its decision. Rather than surrendering, Earth's leaders issued a defiant reply to the Valons. "We are not your subjects," the response read. "Leave our skies or you will regret it." To the Valons, this was laughable. How could such a backward species possibly pose a threat? Confident in their superiority, they launched a small-scale attack to teach these upstarts a lesson. Remote military installations became their targets, chosen to demonstrate power without causing too much collateral damage. At least not yet. But what happened next shocked both sides. When the first Valon assault drones descended upon a coastal defense base, they encountered resistance unlike anything they'd ever seen. Humanity had been busy upgrading its arsenal, incorporating reverse-engineered alien technology into its weapon systems. Energy shields flared to life, deflecting laser blasts that should have obliterated everything in their path. Experimental railguns fired projectiles moving faster than sound, tearing through enemy armor with ease. And then there were the quantum disruptors, devices designed to interfere with the Valon's neural networks, leaving their machines temporarily paralyzed. The battle lasted mere minutes, but its impact reverberated across the galaxy. By the time the smoke cleared, half the Valon drones lay in ruins, while the human forces suffered minimal losses. For the first time in centuries, the Valons tasted defeat, and they hated every second of it. News of the skirmish spread quickly, thanks to Earth's global communication networks. Videos of the battle went viral, showing the world that humanity could hold its own against even the most fearsome adversaries. Cheers erupted in cities around the globe as people celebrated the victory, however small it might have been. Yet amidst the jubilation, a sobering truth lingered. This was only the beginning. The Valons, enraged by their humiliation, doubled down on their aggression. Reinforcements poured into Earth's orbit, turning the once sparse fleet into a menacing armada. Ships of all sizes surrounded the planet, their weapons trained on major population centers. Another ultimatum followed, this one laced with venomous fury. You have defied us once. Do so again, and we will wipe your civilization from existence. This time, humanity didn't respond. There was no need. Everyone knew what was coming next, and preparations shifted into overdrive. Factories worked non-stop, churning out supplies and equipment. Scientists fine-tuned their inventions, squeezing every ounce of potential from the alien tech they'd salvaged. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, learning how to operate unfamiliar machinery and adapt to new combat scenarios. Civilians pitched in wherever they could, volunteering at shelters, hospitals, and in supply depots. Behind the scenes, the young strategists continued to play a pivotal role. Using data gathered from the initial skirmish, they identified weaknesses in the Valon's tactics and developed countermeasures tailored specifically to exploit them. One plan involved deploying decoy satellites to confuse enemy targeting systems. Another called for launching swarms of autonomous drones equipped with quantum disruptors to disable larger ships. Every idea, no matter how unconventional, was considered if it gave humanity an edge. As days turned into weeks, tension mounted. The Valon Armada remained in orbit, casting a shadow over Earth's skies. People looked up at night, wondering when the hammer would fall. Some prayed for peace, hoping the invaders would grow bored and leave. Others steeled themselves for war, and knowing retreat wasn't an option. Then finally the moment arrived. The Valons struck with overwhelming force, raining destruction down on military bases, industrial complexes, and communication hubs. Cities trembled under the onslaught, their streets emptying as civilians fled to underground bunkers. Fires raged unchecked, consuming entire neighborhoods. Smoke choked the air, blotting out the sun. Yet even in the face of such devastation, humanity refused to break. Troops rallied to defend critical locations, using guerrilla tactics to harass the invaders. Engineers worked miracles, repairing damaged equipment and keeping vital systems online. Ordinary citizens risked their lives to aid the wounded, deliver supplies, and maintain morale. Amidst the chaos, stories of heroism emerged. A group of farmers used modified tractors to haul injured soldiers to safety. A teenager hacked into a disabled drone and repurposed it to attack Valon forces. A retired pilot volunteered to fly a prototype fighter jet, knowing full well it might be a suicide mission. These acts of courage reminded everyone why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for the future they dreamed of building. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Humanity's experimental weapons proved devastatingly effective, especially when combined with clever strategy. Railgun-equipped tanks ambushed Valon ground troops, cutting off supply lines. Stealth bombers slipped past enemy defenses, striking key targets before vanishing into the night. Quantum disruptors wreaked havoc on the invaders' command structure, sowing confusion and discord among their ranks. Now the Valons, accustomed to quick victories, found themselves bogged down in a protracted conflict. Their arrogance blinded them to the fact that they were facing an opponent unlike any they'd encountered before. Humans didn't follow rigid protocols or predictable patterns. They adapted, improvised, and innovated on the fly, turning every setback into an opportunity. Still, the cost of resistance was high. Entire towns lay in ruins, their populations displaced or worse. Families mourned, loved ones lost in the fighting. Soldiers returned home bearing physical and emotional scars that would never fully heal. Despite these hardships, the resolve to keep fighting never wavered. By the time the dust settled, both sides had suffered heavy losses. The Valons withdrew temporarily, regrouping to reassess their approach. Humanity, battered but unbroken, took stock of the situation. They had proven they could stand toe-to-toe with galactic overlords, but the real challenge was still ahead, and somewhere in the depths of space, the Valons plotted their revenge. What they didn't realize was that humanity had only scratched the surface of its potential. The best was yet to come. The Valons retreated, licking their wounds and regrouping in the cold silence of space. But no one on Earth believed this was the end. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the invaders returned, and when they did, they would come with even greater force. The brief lull in fighting gave humanity a chance to catch its breath, but there was no room for complacency. Every second counted. In underground bunkers, makeshift command centers buzzed with activity. Scientists worked tirelessly, their eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep as they pored over data and schematics. Engineers tinkered with machines that looked more like science fiction than reality, pushing them to their limits. Soldiers trained relentlessly, preparing for battles that would test not just their strength, but their ingenuity. And ordinary citizens pitched in wherever they could, growing food, caring for the injured, or simply offering words of encouragement to those who needed it most. But amidst all the chaos, one question loomed large. How could humanity hope to defeat an enemy so advanced, so vast, and so ruthless? The answer lay hidden in plain sight, a secret weapon that had been quietly developed during the early days of the conflict. It wasn't a bomb or a missile. It wasn't something that could be seen with the naked eye. And instead, it was knowledge, an understanding of the Valons' greatest weakness. You see, the Valons weren't just conquerors. They were predators, relying on speed, precision, and overwhelming power to crush their enemies. Their entire society revolved around efficiency, from their military tactics to their technology. Even their bodies were wired differently, connected through a neural network that allowed them to communicate instantly and act as a single, cohesive unit. This system made them incredibly effective, but also vulnerable. Human scientists had discovered this flaw while studying the alien artifact found floating in deep space. At first glance, the device seemed indecipherable, its mechanisms far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But after months of experimentation, when they uncovered something remarkable, the Valons' neural network operated on specific frequencies, much like radio waves. If those frequencies could be disrupted, the network would collapse, leaving the invaders disoriented and powerless. It was a risky idea, but humanity had little choice. With limited resources and time running out, they poured everything they had into developing a prototype device capable of interfering with the Valons' neural signals. Dubbed the quantum pulse generator, the machine was bulky and temperamental, requiring massive amounts of energy to function. But if it worked, it could turn the tide of the war. Testing the device proved challenging. Early experiments caused minor disruptions in local electronics, but nothing close to what was needed. Frustration mounted as failures piled up, and some began to doubt whether the project was worth pursuing. Yet the team refused to give up. They tweaked the design, adjusted the settings, and ran simulation after simulation until finally they achieved a breakthrough. During one test, the generator emitted a pulse strong enough to disable a captured Valon drone completely. For the first time, hope flickered in the hearts of those working on the project. Word of the discovery spread quickly, reaching the ears of the young strategist who had played such a crucial role in humanity's defense. Recognizing its potential, they immediately incorporated the quantum pulse generator into their plans. The device wouldn't be enough to win the war on its own. It was too fragile and required precise positioning. But it could create opportunities where none existed before. As preparations continued, the human population rallied behind the effort. Factories retooled their assembly lines to produce components for the generator, while volunteers transported materials across continents under the cover of darkness. In cities still recovering from the Valon's attacks, people gathered in town squares to listen to speeches broadcast over makeshift loudspeakers. Leaders reminded everyone of what was at stake, not just their lives, but the future of their species. "We've faced impossible odds before," one speaker declared, their voice echoing through the crowd. "And every time we've risen to meet them. This is no different. Together, we will show the universe that humanity cannot be broken." Cheers erupted, followed by chants of defiance. Men, women, and children alike raised their fists in solidarity, vowing to stand united against the coming storm. Even those who had once doubted humanity's chances now felt a spark of belief. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull off the impossible. Meanwhile, the Valons prepared for their next assault. Their leaders seethed with rage, unable to comprehend how a species as primitive as humanity had managed to resist them for so long. To them, it was an insult, a stain on their otherwise flawless record of conquest. Determined to erase this embarrassment, they assembled the largest fleet they had ever deployed, consisting of thousands of ships bristling with weapons. At the heart of the armada sat the crown jewel of their empire, a colossal mothership known as the Eradicator. Larger than any vessel humanity had encountered, the Eradicator was designed for one purpose: to annihilate entire planets. Its surface bristled with cannons capable of firing beams of pure energy, while its underside housed launch bays filled with smaller attack craft. Inside, rows of soldiers stood ready to deploy at a moment's notice, their expressions grim and determined. When the Valon fleet re-entered Earth's orbit, it did so with a display of raw power meant to intimidate. Ships descended en masse, blotting out the sun and casting the planet into shadow. Communication channels crackled with threats and ultimatums, demanding immediate surrender. But humanity didn't respond. Instead, they waited, biding their time until the perfect moment arrived. The battle began with a ferocious exchange of fire. Human forces launched salvos of missiles and railgun projectiles, targeting key points in the Valon formation. Energy shields flared as the invaders absorbed the blows, but cracks began to form under the relentless assault. Ground troops clashed in urban areas, exchanging gunfire amidst crumbling buildings and burning streets. The air buzzed with the sound of drones darting between skyscrapers, engaging in dogfights that lit up the sky. Amidst the chaos, the quantum pulse generator entered the fray. Transported aboard a heavily modified cargo plane, the device was flown directly into the heart of the Valon fleet. Pilots risked everything to get it close enough to activate, knowing full well they might not make it back alive. When the generator fired, it unleashed a pulse of energy that rippled through the invaders' ranks. Ships faltered mid-flight. their systems temporarily disabled. Soldiers froze in place, their neural connections severed. And for a brief moment, the Valons were paralyzed. Seizing the opportunity, human forces struck with everything they had. Stealth bombers swooped in to destroy crippled vessels, while ground units advanced to reclaim lost territory. The tide of the battle shifted dramatically, giving humanity the upper hand for the first time since the war began. But victory came at a cost. The generator's activation drained its power completely, rendering it useless for future engagements. Worse still, the Valons quickly adapted, rerouting their systems to bypass the disruption. Though the initial advantage had been significant, it wouldn't last forever. As the fighting raged on, personal stories emerged that highlighted both the heroism and the heartbreak of war. A medic carried a wounded comrade through a hail of bullets, refusing to leave them behind despite the danger. A scientist stayed behind in a collapsing lab to ensure critical data was transmitted safely. A child clung to a tattered stuffed animal, finding comfort in his presence even as explosions shook the ground outside. These moments served as reminders of why humanity fought, not just for survival, but for the bonds that held them together. By the time the dust settled, both sides had suffered heavy losses. The Valons withdrew once again, retreating to regroup and plan their next move. Humanity celebrated the hard-fought victory, but the mood was somber. They had proven they could hold their own against the invaders, but the real challenge was yet to come. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Valons plotted their revenge. What they didn't realize was that humanity had only scratched the surface of its potential. The best was yet to come. The Valons had tasted defeat twice now, and it burned like acid in their veins. For a species that prided itself on invincibility, every loss was an insult they couldn't tolerate. Back in the cold void of space, far from Earth's skies, their leaders convened in a towering citadel made of blackened steel and pulsating energy. The air crackled with tension as they plotted their next move. A plan so devastating that humanity wouldn't stand a chance. What emerged from those shadowy chambers was the Eradicator, the colossal mothership at the heart of their armada. It wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon of planetary destruction, designed to obliterate entire worlds in a single strike. Its arrival signaled the beginning of humanity's darkest hour. When the massive vessel descended into Earth's orbit, it cast a shadow so vast that daylight seemed to vanish beneath its bulk. Panic swept across the planet as people realized this wasn't another skirmish. It was an execution. Humanity braced for impact. Cities emptied as civilians fled to underground shelters, clutching whatever supplies they could carry. Soldiers manned their posts, knowing full well they might not survive the coming onslaught. Scientists worked feverishly to find a way to counteract the Eradicator's power, but time was running out. Every simulation ended the same way. Earth reduced to rubble, its surface scorched and lifeless. The first strike came without warning. A beam of pure energy lanced down from the heavens, striking a coastal city with unimaginable force. In an instant, skyscrapers crumbled, oceans boiled, and millions perished. The shock wave rippled outward, leveling everything in its path. Survivors stumbled through the ruins, their faces streaked with ash and tears, searching for loved ones who would never be found. The devastation didn't stop there. The Eradicator unleashed wave after wave of attacks, targeting military installations, industrial hubs, and population centers alike. Each strike left behind a smoking crater where life once thrived. Communication networks collapsed under the strain, leaving isolated pockets of resistance struggling to coordinate. Morale plummeted as the reality of the situation sank in. Humanity was losing. In the midst of this chaos, cracks began to form within Earth's leadership. Some argued for surrender, we believing it was the only way to spare what remained of their species. Others insisted on fighting to the bitter end, unwilling to bow to tyranny even if it meant extinction. Debates turned into shouting matches and unity. The very thing that had kept humanity alive thus far threatened to unravel. It was during one of these heated arguments that the young strategists stepped forward, their voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Surrender isn't an option," they said firmly, their eyes blazing with determination. "If we give up now, everything we fought for will have been for nothing. We owe it to those who've sacrificed everything to keep going." Their words struck a chord. Slowly, reluctantly, the room fell silent as everyone absorbed the truth. Surrender wouldn't save them. It would only delay the inevitable. If humanity wanted to survive, they had to fight, not just with weapons, but with every ounce of creativity, courage, and resilience they possessed. With renewed resolve, humanity turned its attention to finding a weakness in the Eradicator. Scientists pored over data collected during previous battles, analyzing patterns and anomalies in the mothership's behavior. Engineers dissected fragments of destroyed Valon technology, searching for clues that might lead to a breakthrough. And then, buried deep within the wreckage of a downed drone, they found it, a flaw in the Eradicator's design. The massive vessel relied on a central core to power its weapons and maintain its structural integrity. Without it, the ship would collapse under its own weight. But reaching the core wouldn't be easy. It was located deep within the mothership, protected by layers of armor and swarms of enemy soldiers. Any attempt to infiltrate the vessel would require precision, stealth, and sheer guts. A plan began to take shape. A small team of volunteers would board the Eradicator, navigate its labyrinthine corridors, and plant explosives near the core. Once detonated, the blast would disable the ship and buy humanity precious time to regroup. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple. Everyone involved knew they wouldn't make it back alive. Yet despite the odds, dozens of people stepped forward to volunteer. Among them were ordinary individuals thrust into extraordinary circumstances. A factory worker who had spent years assembling parts for military vehicles now offered to pilot the infiltration craft. A teacher who had taught history lessons about past wars volunteered to serve as the team's navigator. A mechanic who specialized in repairing damaged machinery signed up to handle any technical challenges they encountered along the way. Together, they formed a ragtag group united by a single purpose: to save their world. As the team prepared for their mission, the rest of humanity rallied behind them. Messages of support poured in from around the globe, carried by radio waves and handwritten notes. Children drew pictures of rockets and heroes, taping them to walls as symbols of hope. Families gathered in shelters, praying for the success of those brave enough to face the impossible. The night before the mission, the team gathered in a dimly lit briefing room. Maps and schematics covered the walls, detailing every known aspect of the Eradicator's layout. Their leader, a grizzled veteran with more scars than anyone cared to count, spoke in a low, steady voice. "This won't be easy," he admitted, "but if we succeed, we'll give humanity a fighting chance. That's worth dying for." No one slept that night. Instead, they checked and rechecked their equipment, rehearsed their roles, and shared quiet moments of reflection. Some wrote letters to loved ones, knowing they'd never be delivered. Others simply sat in silence, staring at the stars outside the window. When dawn broke, the team boarded their craft, a sleek experimental vessel designed for speed and stealth. As they launched into the sky, the world watched with bated breath. Screens flickered to life in shelters and bunkers, broadcasting live footage of the daring mission. Commentators whispered updates, their voices trembling with emotion. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred in the hearts of billions. The journey to the Eradicator was fraught with danger. Enemy fighters swarmed around the mothership, patrolling its perimeter like guard dogs. The infiltration craft dodged and weaved through the chaos, narrowly avoiding collisions and laser fire. Inside, the team held their breath, knowing one wrong move could spell disaster. Finally, they reached the docking bay and slipped inside undetected. The moment they stepped onto the Eradicator's metallic floors, alarms blared, alerting the Valons to their presence. The race against time had begun. Navigating the ship's interior felt like walking through a nightmare. Corridors twisted and turned unpredictably, lined with pulsating conduits and glowing panels. Enemy soldiers appeared around every corner, forcing the team to rely on quick reflexes and teamwork to survive. At one point, they encountered a locked door blocking their path. The mechanic worked frantically to override the security system, sweat dripping from their brow as seconds ticked away. Despite the odds, they pressed on, driven by a shared sense of duty. Along the way, they discovered something unexpected: prisoners. Dozens of beings from other conquered worlds languished in cells, their spirits broken but not entirely extinguished. Without hesitation, the team freed them, offering a glimmer of hope to those who had long given up. Finally, they reached the core chamber. The room was immense, dominated by a towering structure humming with raw energy. Placing the explosives required careful timing and coordination. As the charges were set, the team prepared for the final leg of their mission: escape. But the Valons weren't about to let them leave. Reinforcements flooded the chamber, surrounding the team with overwhelming numbers. Outgunned and outnumbered, the volunteers fought with everything they had, buying precious seconds for the explosives to arm. One by one they fell, their sacrifices ensuring the mission's success. When the countdown reached 0, the explosives detonated, sending a shock wave through the Eradicator. The mothership groaned and shuddered, its systems failing as the core imploded. Outside, human forces watched in awe as the massive vessel collapsed in on itself, disappearing in a blaze of light. Back on Earth, cheers erupted as news of the victory spread. Humanity had dealt a crippling blow to the Valons, it proving once again that they couldn't be broken. But the cost was high. The brave souls who had infiltrated the Eradicator didn't return, their names etched into history as symbols of sacrifice and courage. Though battered and bruised, humanity stood tall. They had faced their darkest hour and emerged stronger for it. But the war wasn't over yet. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Valons regrouped, vowing revenge. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would never stop fighting for its future. The destruction of the Eradicator sent shock waves through the galaxy, both literal and figurative. For humanity, it was more than just a victory. It was proof that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire strong enough to burn down the mightiest empire. The Valons, once thought invincible, had been humbled not once, but twice by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. News of Earth's triumph spread like wildfire, carried by signals intercepted by distant civilizations who had long lived under the shadow of fear. For the first time in centuries, whispers of rebellion began to ripple across the stars. Oppressed worlds, inspired by humanity's defiance, dared to dream of freedom. Leaders of other species, emboldened by Earth's example, reached out cautiously, seeking alliances with the planet that had stood up to the Valons. Humanity, once isolated and overlooked, found itself at the center of a galactic awakening. But while the rest of the universe marveled at Earth's resilience, those on the blue planet knew better than to celebrate too soon. The cost of their victories weighed heavily on their shoulders. Cities lay in ruins, each their streets silent except for the wind whistling through broken windows. Families mourned, loved ones lost in battles or crushed beneath collapsing buildings. Soldiers returned home bearing scars, some visible, others hidden deep within. The wounds inflicted by the war would take generations to heal, if they ever fully did. In the aftermath, humanity came together to rebuild. Factories that had churned out weapons now produced materials for reconstruction. Engineers who had designed machines of war turned their skills toward creating tools for peace. Farmers planted crops in fields scarred by conflict, determined to feed a population still reeling from hardship. Ordinary people rolled up their sleeves and got to work, driven by a shared vision of a brighter future. At the heart of this effort was unity, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. Nations that had once squabbled over borders and resources set aside their differences, pooling their strengths for the greater good. Scientists collaborated across continents, sharing knowledge and innovations that pushed humanity further along the path of progress. Artists painted murals depicting scenes of hope and resilience, reminding everyone of what they had fought so hard to protect. Yet amidst the rebuilding, there were moments of reflection. In town squares and quiet corners, people gathered to honor those who had given everything. Memorials sprang up, adorned with flowers, candles, and messages scrawled on scraps of paper. "We will never forget" became a refrain echoed around the globe, a promise to carry forward the legacy of courage and sacrifice. One such memorial stood near the ruins of a coastal city devastated by the Eradicator. At its center was a statue, a simple figure raising a hand toward the sky, symbolizing humanity's unyielding spirit. On the base, an inscription read, "To those who dared to believe in a better tomorrow." Visitors left offerings at its feet, photographs of smiling faces, letters written to those no longer there, and small tokens of remembrance. It was a place of sorrow, yes, but also of gratitude. For without the sacrifices made, there would be no tomorrow to look forward to. As Earth healed, its leaders turned their attention to the future. They knew the Valons wouldn't stay away forever. Somewhere in the depths of space, the invaders regrouped, plotting their next move. Revenge burned in their hearts, and when they returned, now they would bring everything they had. Humanity couldn't afford to let its guard down, not for a moment. Preparations began immediately. Research facilities expanded, exploring new technologies inspired by the alien artifacts that had sparked humanity's rise. Military bases trained recruits using lessons learned from past battles, emphasizing adaptability and teamwork over brute force. Diplomatic efforts intensified, forging alliances with other species eager to resist the Valon Empire. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. Humanity realized that survival wasn't just about strength or technology, it was about identity. What made them unique, their curiosity, creativity, and refusal to give up, was their greatest weapon. These qualities weren't just tools for war, they were the foundation of a society worth fighting for. And this shift in mindset manifested in unexpected ways. Schools introduced programs focused on critical thinking and problem solving, encouraging students to imagine solutions to challenges yet unseen. Communities organized workshops where people shared skills and ideas, fostering collaboration and innovation. Even entertainment reflected this new outlook, with stories celebrating ingenuity and perseverance becoming wildly popular. Meanwhile, humanity's growing reputation attracted attention from beyond the stars. Envoys from distant civilizations arrived, seeking partnerships based on mutual respect rather than domination. Some offered advanced knowledge, hoping to aid Earth's development. Others sought refuge, fleeing persecution by the Valons or other tyrannical regimes. Humanity welcomed them with open arms, recognizing that diversity was a source of strength. Of course, not everyone viewed Earth's rise with admiration. Rival factions within the galaxy watched with suspicion, wondering whether humanity's newfound power would make them allies or adversaries. Whispers of jealousy and fear circulated, fueling debates about how best to handle the upstart species. But humanity remained steadfast in its commitment to peace, refusing to repeat the mistakes of those who had come before. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such upheaval. Children played in parks rebuilt from rubble, their laughter echoing through the air. Couples strolled hand in hand along streets lined with freshly planted trees. Markets bustled with activity, Vendors calling out to passers-by as the smell of fresh bread wafted through the crowd. Yet despite these signs of recovery, reminders of the war lingered. Night skies bore faint scars from battles fought above the atmosphere. Museums displayed artifacts recovered from the conflict, telling the story of humanity's struggle for survival. And in quiet moments, people looked up at the stars, wondering what awaited them out there. It was during one such moment that the young strategist who had guided humanity through its darkest hours spoke publicly for the last time. Standing atop a hill overlooking a city bathed in golden sunlight, they addressed a crowd gathered below. "We've come so far," they began, their voice steady but filled with emotion. "From the moment we first heard the Velan's ultimatum, and we chose to fight, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We fought for our families, our homes, and our dreams. And though the road ahead is uncertain, I have faith in us, because we are human. And being human means never giving up." Their words resonated deeply, earning applause and cheers from the audience. But as the strategists stepped away from the podium, they knew their role was complete. Humanity didn't need a single leader anymore. It needed everyone working together. Months passed, then years. Earth continued to evolve, transforming itself into a beacon of hope for the galaxy. Its people dreamed of exploring the stars, not as conquerors, but as explorers seeking connection and understanding. Ships powered by quantum engines ventured into uncharted territories, carrying messages of peace and goodwill. And yet, shadows lingered on the horizon. Reports trickled in of Velan fleets massing at the edges of known space. Rumors spoke of new weapons, deadlier than anything seen before. Humanity braced itself, knowing another battle loomed, but this time, they faced it with confidence. They had proven they could stand against impossible odds. They had shown the universe that even the smallest light could shine brightly in the darkest night. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as humans. As the sun rose over a rebuilt world, casting its glow across fields, oceans, and cities, humanity looked to the stars with determination. The journey was far from over, but they were ready to fight, to build and to dream, because they were human. And being human meant believing in a better tomorrow, even when the odds seemed insurmountable.